Now, our most viral video, I know, humble little channel, but we're kind of excited. It's had almost 10,000 views now, and it's actually a video from our second ever podcast, and it was where Dr. Rod and I spoke about where we're talking about exiting and how to exit well, and we spoke about Brian Houston, and we've done a number of sessions or videos on Brian Houston and Hillsong, and they are ones that do tend to get a little bit of more of a response. So for good and bad reasons. So let's keep rolling on. Now. So what we're actually talking about in this video was actually, I'm gonna scroll up because it's confusing seeing me talk and hear me talk in another, or see me talk in another video. But we were actually talking about, this video was when we were talking about exiting well, because in leadership, we always have to exit, at some point, unfortunately, whether for good reasons or bad reasons. And usually on the way we exit, it can be controversial. And this was a big exit where we were talking about Brian and Bobby Houston being kicked out. No, Erin, you don't need to, but thank you for asking. They were removed from senior leadership because there was all the controversy, all the drama. They were going through court cases, and there was a whole bunch of things going on in Hillsong Church that they were removed. And it was how they responded to that removal that we were actually discussing. And that'll probably be an important part that we'll get into a little bit later. But I want to kind of spend, this is probably the main one that I want to spend a lot of time in the comments, because there was a lot of very interesting things to say that people had to say about this that I want to have a chance to be able to respond to. And the first comment that I actually want to respond to is, let me just read it out, from Ginger Collier 7949. Thank you for your comments, and thank you everyone for your comments. When you comment, we do read them. Don't always get to respond because some of them just don't actually need responding. But we appreciate you putting in your comments, good or bad, preferably good. Prefer the good ones, especially with my psychologist here on the call. She knows I prefer the good ones. Okay, so Ginger Collier wrote, I have experienced with a fallen pastor over my church. It was hard and a sad time for myself, who'd been a friend of our church family. From what I've read and listened to in the media in America, the drugs and adultery are the least of what I'd be worried about. And then he goes on to talk about, the issues of Hillsong Church. But what I kind of want to touch on first here with both Erin and Dr. Rod is the challenge of, because what's highlighted, what I see out of this comment is the pain that people experience when leaders make mistakes. And let's as I say with all these things, we're leaving the controversy aside. None of us know all of the situations, everything going on. Yes, they made some poor decisions, and there was some things that happened that we don't agree with. It's been through court, been found not guilty. There's all the we need to respect that decision. But leaders make mistakes. Actually, I want to hit off with Erin first of all. Why does it have such a negative effect when a leader makes mistakes? Because we're all human, we all make mistakes. But why does it have such a bigger impact when leaders make a mistake, and why does it affect people more?
It's a good question, isn't it? And there's probably lots of ways I could take that. But I think the primary reason it creates such pain and stress for people is due to the fact that we know implicitly that leaders have stepped forward to take on additional responsibility. I mean, that is what being a leader, you see a gap or a need, and you step forward to say, I'm here to take care of that need, to take on the responsibility of solving this problem, and for, leading people through this, particular challenge that they may be facing. And so when we see that somebody that we have trusted with this additional responsibility fall in such a, I guess you could say dramatic way because it was public, that really does, I think, hit us in the core of our sense of trust, our sense of ability to be able to rely on others, and particularly those who do have some sort of responsibility over us. So that's one aspect of it. I think another part of the reason that this pain can be felt so acutely during these times is to do with the fact that there's often a disconnect between the way a leader is either represented or presented in our minds and the reality of who they are. And we tend to focus on this representation, the branding, I don't want to say character, but there's a certain avatar sometimes that we build in our minds around who this leader is. And it can be difficult sometimes to actually confront the reality of what's going on for a person in the real world rather than this avatar. So I'd say they're two of the bigger reasons I can see for this pain. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
That's really good. There was a couple of things you mentioned there is the trust, right? And so, yes, we are a leadership podcast, but I wanna kind of focus on the follower for a moment, because as leaders, like, we're all followers as well, and we've all been hurt by a leader, a mentor, or someone that's been leading us. You mentioned that word trust, that we've had our trust broken, that we put a lot into these people, and one thought that came to mind was a pedestal, right? We do tend to put people in a leadership position up on a pedestal and forget that they are human and see their gifts, but we tend to at the start maybe ignore their flaws until their flaws then start affecting people. Then we can only see their flaws and not see their gift. What can we do as followers, as people that are following people, being inspired, being led by people? What can we do to protect ourselves from that, from that impact, while still being able to honor and respect those people? Because I think that what I find is the people that I've seen that have been hurt by leadership, especially church leadership, they've then never been able to trust church leadership ever again. And my biggest pain point with that is the fact that, well, then they're out of relationship with God now, and they don't, because of this thing. So how can we protect ourselves without limiting ourselves from having good experiences?
Yeah, a lot of things came up in my mind again as you were talking, but probably the biggest thing that came up was being aware of our biases as humans. So there are, a whole plethora of cognitive biases that each and every one of us, unfortunately carries just due to our limitations of being human. And one of those that we tend to kind of fall into or get trapped by is something called black or white thinking. And so this is that phenomenon that you were just talking about, where somebody's either all good or they're all bad. They're all talented or they're useless. And there's this kind of extreme splitting of the way that we're viewing something. So I'd say probably the best way that we can both protect ourselves and also still be able to trust and engage, in the Christian community or any community that you may be part of, is to respect the nuance, to understand that the majority of life is shades of grey, that there are going to be, that you're going to need to analyze things at a little bit more of a sophisticated level, and look at the ways in which somebody's leadership may be serving you, look at the ways in which they may be helping you, And also ask yourself those honest questions around, is there anything I can learn about what not to do from this person? Is there anything I can learn about what mistakes to avoid, just so you have a more balanced view of the leadership? So I'd say that's probably a big one.
Yeah, I think that's probably been my biggest key with negative experiences with leadership, is the fact that while I'm experiencing it, I'm very consciously aware of the flaws, and I'm absorbing that and going, okay, now I know what not to do, and I'm trying my best to avoid that. Try my best. Don't always avoid it, but try my best to avoid those mistakes. Dr. Rod, you've obviously, as a pastor, I know that you have mentored a lot of people through that hurt, through that journey. What's your advice to people that have been hurt by leadership in ministry, in business, in personal life, maybe be parents or whatever? What's your advice to those people in helping them go through that journey?
Well, look, if we're talking about Christians and church settings in general, I think we need to understand that first and foremost, we're followers of Jesus Christ. That really has to be our main focus. And then we have to recognise that all of us have our strengths and our weaknesses, and we will at times disappoint one another. And I think in having that perspective, we're less likely to put any one individual on a pedestal. It's hard not to do, because look, I've had leaders in my own life. In fact, I had one. I used to actually pray, "Dear God, don't let me put him on a pedestal," because this guy, he was just such a wonderful, wonderful leader. And he did make some mistakes, and years later, said to me, "I think I was wrong in that area." But I never really experienced that kind of disappointment, because I'd made up my mind a long time ago that first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. My leaders are in many ways like me. They're flawed like I am. They make mistakes like I do. And I need to be ready to forgive those mistakes. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some action that follows. So, for example, sometimes the healthy thing for someone to do is actually to leave one fellowship and join another. Sometimes the healthy thing is for the oversight of the church to actually remove a leader. And I've seen that done numerous times.
Yeah. Let's shift to the leader. How do we as I could see where the question was going, is like, how do we as leaders not make mistakes? But not like that. But how do we as leaders, look, we do need to carry ourselves, as Erin said earlier, that as leaders we take on an additional responsibility. We have to accept that. How do we carry ourselves in a way that is worthy of a leader, that we're carrying that authority, but we're not facilitating people putting us on a pedestal?
Look, just briefly, I think what we need to understand is that we're actually servants. And we're also stewards. So God has given us a vision. We're the stewards of that vision, and we're actually here to serve those around us. Yep. So, there's been lots and lots written about servant leadership. There's been a lot less written about steward leadership. Mm-hmm. But I think the best leaders combine shepherd, steward, and servant. So we shepherd the people around us. We serve both God, the vision that God has given us, and we serve those around us, and we're actually stewards of the vision. So I think if we have that attitude, we're a little bit less likely to lead as a major general might lead. Yeah. And we're more likely to be interested in building people up, raising people up as leaders to replace ourselves, and being aware that all of those around us are thinking and feeling beings. In other words, they have a soul just like we do.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, can I actually
that word servant? So sorry,
Go,
go,
go, go.
Erin.
I was actually just gonna jump in to echo what Dr. Rob was saying, and I might be quite biased, but I actually think that the best leaders are mental health leaders, and that's not to say that you need to be an expert or that you need to know how to counsel somebody or do anything that you would require extra training for. But I think it's that understanding that your first responsibility, first and foremost, is to your people. So whether that's employees in your organization, volunteers at your church, whoever it might be who's directly under you, you really need to be thinking a lot about what sorts of challenges they may be facing through their work that may impact them psychologically. And to also be very sensitive during times of, crisis or challenge. Obviously we've got a really volatile world. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening at the moment, and we've probably got a lot of people having a lot of pretty strong emotional reactions right now. And so having that awareness and that ability to tend to something like that, I think, is always going to be a mark of a really great leader.
That's really good. I feel like that word servant leadership is one that's thrown around a lot, but never actually executed on, or very rarely, not successfully. And I find that those people that are, especially the charismatics leaders, like you said, Dr. Rod, earlier, God's given us a vision. And we have this idea of our vision is just to serve people, but we can get so caught up in trying to rally people around us to serve our vision, and we start building that vision rather than focusing on building the people and actually serving the people. And we look at them as servants, like they're there to serve me and my vision to achieve it, where, people aren't. And it's really challenging. I think that going back to that comment on our first video about the people that are hurt, I think that what you're saying there is, Erin, very important, that they didn't have people around them that could support them mentally, that couldn't be that proper emotional support. And it was probably, having been in this situation many times, it was probably someone else in the church that actually isn't a leader at all, or someone else in the organization that isn't in a leadership position that actually offered them that emotional support, that mental support that you said. I believe as leaders, we have to be focused on being able to build people emotionally as well as practically, building their skill levels, like our leadership development program. Shameless plug, free leadership development program, link in description. We spend the first 20 weeks on mindset stuff. First 10 weeks on discovering your purpose, next 10 weeks on mindset, development, because I believe that as a leader, that's the crucial stuff. We need to know what our purpose is, and then we've got to have our head straight and know how to be able to help people through that headspace stuff. Like you say, I don't have to be a psychologist. We don't have to have special training, but you kind of got to be in that headspace. You've got to know what works.
Yeah, I mean, and it's as simple as if you don't have in your organization, if you're a leader and your people don't feel that they can come to you because they're overwhelmed by something, or because they need a mental health day because something's happened in their personal lives, or because they're struggling with something in their role, that's a huge red flag. And just so that approachability around that stuff, that's going to make all the difference. That is leadership without having any particular expertise or skills. And it may just be that it's something that you don't know how to help with personally, but you know how to direct them to resources, or you know how to give them a break or time off, or those really, really simple gestures that really inspires a lot of like trust and well-deserved trust in people.
There's so many comments in here that I wanted to get to, but I'm really enjoying this conversation, Erin. You brought up that word trust again. No, Yash, we don't need it on the screen because I'm not actually going to go to the comments. There was so many comments I wanted to respond to, but trust. How do we build, as a leader, how do we build trust? And as followers, how do we repair trust?
Great questions. Dr. Rod, do you want to have a go at this one? Big questions.
You have to be resolutely trustworthy. People are not going to trust you if you're not trustworthy. And one mistake, of course, can take a long, long time to repair. So I really think that you have to show by consistent behaviour that you're actually worthy of trust. And what does that require? Look, most of the time I think it requires you being totally open, not having a hidden agenda, recognising that you are shepherd, steward and servant, all three rolled into one. And look, if you're a Christian leader, you really need to spend a lot of time understanding the work of the shepherd, because I think it will really open your eyes to what leadership is all about. So those things are really important. And I think you do have to be deliberate in what you say, everything you do publicly, whatever you do on social media, whatever you say as leader in front of your people, the way in which you treat individuals, even if it might be a confidential situation. Those things all matter a lot to trust.
Yeah. Erin, did you have something else to add there?
No, I mean, I think that's what the foundation is. I mean, I think anything that you can do as well that shows people that you are at least taking into account how decisions may affect them as well. So just again, that empathy, that ability to take the perspective of other people in your organization, and not simply just drill ahead with the vision without remembering that there's often a human cost to every decision.
That's good.
I think that's all fantastic stuff.
The human cost to every decision. I like that. It kind of reminds me of talking about this trusting and everything like that. Talking about one thing we always coach is and like an emotional bank account, that we as leaders should see that we carry an emotional bank account with the people we lead, and we should be constantly making deposits, emotional deposits, and they go into that mindset. Taking care of their minds as well, making sure that we are investing into and depositing into that emotional bank account, being there for them, asking them how they're doing, giving them a lending ear, just supporting them through things. If they need, showing that you're there for them. That when we do make those mistakes, sometimes that's a withdrawal from the bank account. And if we have filled up that bank account enough, then us making a mistake or two every now and then isn't actually the world's not going to fall apart. But if we're not in making those regular deposits into the bank accounts of those people we're leading regularly and constantly making sure that their credit balance is full, then when we do make mistakes, that's when we see things fall apart, and then they can only see our flaws and not our gifts. There was one little thing that you mentioned there, Dr. Rod, about being open and honest with people. It kind of brings us back to the topic of the actual video, and there were a number of comments about. Actually, it was really interesting how many comments there were about Brian Houston and his failures and all that sort of stuff. And we were just talking about a post on social media. That's all it was. Actually, there was a couple of comments of like at the start, we started out by going, our heart breaks for the situation. And I think that a lot of people just stopped watching it there. And then made a comment and then clicked off because they obviously didn't hear the rest of the conversation that we said. And actually, I want to pick your brain a bit for that, both Dr. Rod and Erin, but it's from a psychological standpoint. I kind of want to find out, because as leaders, we get a lot of hate. We get a lot of negative comments. Like, we got a lot of negative comments in this video of people that quite clearly hadn't watched the whole video, hadn't seen any of our other stuff, didn't actually consider what we were saying, and just jumped on like one negative comment of like at the start, we're like, well, our heart breaks for them because they've just been pulled from the church there, and didn't hear the rest of the thing that we said, because we were just talking about a post. We weren't talking about any of the other stuff that they were doing. What is it that makes people want to attack us? In leadership positions, we're now a target, and people will just grab onto one little thing we say and attack us for that.
Look, that's just people's natural reaction. They filter everything, don't they? Same as we do.
Yeah. Yep. No, I was 100% going to say the same thing. I think I guess we could try to analyze what may cause somebody to want to attack leaders, but I think the truth is a lot more mundane than that, and I think it's more about this confirmation bias situation that Dr. Rod was just sort of pointing out, that people tend to formulate opinions maybe in not the most thorough or well thought out way, and then once that opinion is solid, it's kind of like wearing a set of glasses and then coming into that set of glasses that says, this leader is bad, is now going through that lens and coming into their, sensory and perceptual apparatus in a way that's now kind of modified and filtered. And a lot of it has to do with, like, I don't want to sound too negative, but there is like a level of laziness there, because it requires a lot of attention and energy in order to be able to really think through something, look at all of the information, look at all sides of a situation, and then come to a really like nuanced, well thought out position on something. That's really hard. But just going, that guy bad, like did wrong thing, now bad, that's really easy. And then you can find information all over the place to support that if you want to. So again, I think that's just another kind of just being mindful of these traps that we can get ourselves into, that we can be quick to formulate opinions. And the easiest opinion is usually the wrong one.
I like that. The easiest opinion is quite often the wrong one. That's almost that should be a post right there. My team, I hope you snip that out and just like, that's our post for the week, right? Like quite often the easy answer or easy response is the wrong one.
But I think too, Craig, people put our comments into a bigger picture, because there's a lot of knowledge. Some of it might be misunderstanding, but people have a lot of knowledge of Hillsong because of its profile internationally, the influence that Hillsong has had on contemporary praise and worship music and so on. So, I mean, I didn't feel that there were too many comments that were directed at us personally. It was more people expressing the opinions they already held about either Brian Houston or about Hillsong. Yeah. So what I saw in many comments, I've seen many, many times before in different on different media, on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, Instagram. It's there. It's there everywhere. And so I think people were more just making statements about their personal position with respect to Brian Houston and or the church, rather than attacking us personally. In fact, I found, well, virtually most of the comments on all of our podcasts, generally speaking, they're not attacking us personally. There are a few, but I think on the whole, the people commenting have been quite civil, actually.
Yeah, and I think it comes from that place of pain, of hurt.
I think
People
so.
have been hurt,
Yep.
and they're just and look, that's kind of our whole vision of the whole purpose of what we're building with the leadership program and with this podcast is we know that leaders are hurting people, and there's a lot of hurt people out there that we want to. The best way for us to what we believe we're called to do is let's attack it from the top, and let's fix the leadership issue so that people aren't hurt. And so yes, you're right that they weren't necessarily negative towards us. They were negative towards Brian. There were some people that were negative towards us, but that's okay. I forgive you. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.